Are we right down there, Dave?
All systems go.
All systems go. That's good. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to worship. Dave, did you get Dan a bulletin? Everything is going smoothly this morning. Once again, I'm at the controls with this wonderful little gadget which allows me to control the camera back there, but Dave is our fail-safe because I still don't trust me, and I'm not sure if you trust me, but just to make sure that I get the right buttons pushed so that the right camera angles come up and all of that stuff. Technology is a wonderful thing. I keep telling myself that. I may believe it one day. But it is good to have you worshiping with us here in Sealy's Bay this morning, and for those of you who have gathered to watch online at a later time, it is good to have you watching along with us as well, and hopefully participating in the service that we are recording this morning. There's a few announcements that I would invite you to have a look at in the insert in the bulletin, including our upcoming council meetings. So the Olivet meeting is Tuesday, November the 2nd at 7:30 p.m. And just had a talk with Chris Monroe. So Sealy's Bay, Wednesday, November the 3rd is right, but she had a recollection, and I think she's right, that we had changed the time to 1 p.m. So make note of that, because we decided, I think, that everybody who was on the board could make the afternoon date. So 1 p.m. on November the 3rd for Sealy's Bay. Official board the following week on Tuesday, also at Sealy's Bay, but that at 7:30. The talent auction, do make note, an important change there. We had initially thought perhaps the 20th, but the 27th will be the day, and we are allowed to be at the community hall with 50% capacity. So it will be a live auction, doors open at 6, and then the bidding starts at 7. So make note of that. The 27th, with doors open at 6 at the fire hall in Sealy's Bay, and then the bidding starts at 7. The worship services are up there as well. October the 31st, Sealy's Bay, we're back here, and then the subsequent 2 weeks in November in Olivet, and then back to Sealy's Bay for the last 2 weeks of November, and already we are looking at Advent. So wow, we are getting through the fall quickly. By the way, because it's Halloween next week, there may just be a special guest or some special music on October the 31st, so we'll see how that goes. I'm still talking to the booking agency, so we'll see, but we may be able to get a singer in for the October the 31st date. I do want to say a quick word as the executive director of the Food Center, Rolade Center, the food bank in this community, but also serving the wider communities, Lansdowne and Lyndhurst and Sealy's Bay, and all places around Leeds and Thousand Islands municipality. Thank you for everyone who helped to make it a very successful food drive, and it was quite good. And so I don't have the totals quite yet, but as I was saying to a few people, we had one of the restaurants, the pub, the Old English Pub in Gann, pledged a pickup truck full of food to us. We had Chuck Galway bring down a pickup of food from the golf course. So between those things, I think we had 5 or 6 pickup trucks full of food gathered at the 3 places, on top of a lot of substantial number of financial donations. So we will be well served going into the fall season and going towards Christmas. So once again, thanks to everybody. Really, really pleased about the response in the community, as I always am, that we support these things. So thank you. With all those things in mind, am I missing anything? Again, I have the luxury of actually having people around now who can tell me when I'm wrong. What have I missed? Is there another?
I know the talent auction group is meeting at Olivet tomorrow at 1.
Talent auction group is meeting at Olivet tomorrow at 1. So if you're on the talent auction group, reminder, Olivet tomorrow at 1. Thank you. Thanks, Mary. So from all of those things going on that occupy our time, that keep us busy, we take a moment to clear the decks a little bit, to settle the breathing and the activity of the mind Give thanks for God's presence in this place. Light a candle. Have a moment of silence and reflection. And share these words of call. Greetings to our brothers and sisters in the faith.
We come to celebrate God's presence.
And God's love expressed through Jesus Christ.
We come as pilgrim people, searching for ways to live out our faith.
We come seeking the strength to carry on our journey.
Let us rejoice in God's gift to us.
And just a reminder for everybody, we are remaining seated as we have these hymns and the introit. We are allowed to sing, but we have to keep the masks on, and we'll remain seated as we sing the Holy Sacred Spirit. Let us pray. God of many names, in these uncertain times, we hold fast to your unwavering love. Draw us close to one another and to your mercy, which is strong and true. Open our hearts to the wonder of transformative love, tender, courageous, and justice-seeking. We pray as your faith-filled lovers. Amen. Our opening hymn is How Sweet the Name of Jesus Sounds. It's number 344 in Voices United. And we continue in prayer, sharing a prayer of reconciliation. Holy Mystery, Life Giver, I yearn for your compassion and healing. My soul aches, I feel pain. I'm apprehensive and uncertain of the path I should follow. You have brought me to this place where I understand that I need you. I come to you with a hopeful heart. I have known the peace of the Spirit's presence and desire reacquaintance with it. I yearn for the light that can dispel the shadows. Awaken me to your voice. I long to celebrate your holy presence once more. May it be so. I had a question that I asked on the Facebook page in preparation for this morning, and the question was around asking. So if you ask a question about asking, I don't know if that qualifies as a method or not, I don't know. But the question was, what's the hardest ask you ever made in your life? Think about some of the things that you've asked of other people. Perhaps it was of yourself. But what's the hardest ask? So for some people it might be a relationship thing. Was it asking somebody to spend the rest of your life with that person at some point? Was it something to do in finance? Was it having to go to a bank or someplace and ask for a sizable sum of money? Does somebody have one that comes right to mind that they wouldn't mind sharing about a big ask?
I don't see well. I have a hard time asking people to drive me to appointments and shopping and so on.
Oh wow, yeah, that's a big one.
Yes.
I'm with you on that. It's one of I hate to ask people because if we find, I don't know why. Why do we find that hard? Do you ever think about why that is? Yeah, I'm with you. I can appreciate having to ask someone to help out when we need help. Yeah, that can be a tough one, for sure. Other ones that people might have? Well, I invite you to think about that because what we are reading in the Gospel from Mark for this Sunday is a big ask indeed. And it comes from Bartimaeus, who Jesus is going to encounter on the road. So think about the ask that Bartimaeus has, and think about, I invite you to consider why that's a difficult ask, why that could be at least a very difficult ask for Bartimaeus to make. And then we'll reflect a little bit more on that as we hear the word and reflect on the word. But in the meantime, I ask you just to think about those asks and why they were difficult and how it felt when you actually make the ask. And was there a sense of relief, or was there a sense of just, oh, what have I done? It could be any one of those responses. It's individual to a lot of people, but there's also, I think, some themes we can tease out over asking, and why some people might find it easier and why some might find it hard. But that is the question that we are considering this Sunday. So I would ask you to sing number 665 in Voices United, Pass Me Not, O Gentle Savior. to sing one for you from More Voices. And it's one that we have sung a few times before, so it may be familiar to you. Certainly the tune, Wild Mountain Thyme, would be familiar to a number of you as well. But it's Spirit, Open My Heart. Spirit, open my heart to the joy and pain of living. As you love, may I love in receiving and in giving. Spirit, open my God, replace my stony heart with a heart that's kind and tender. All my coldness and fear, to your grace I now surrender. Spirit, open my heart to the joy and pain of living. As you love, may I love in receiving and in giving. Spirit, open my heart. Write your love upon my heart, as my law, my goal, my story, in each thought, word, and deed. May my living bring you glory. Spirit, open my heart to the joy and pain of living. As you love, may I love in receiving and in giving. Spirit, open my heart. May I weep with those who weep, share the joy of sister, brother, in the welcome of Christ. May we welcome one another. Spirit, open my heart to the joy and pain of living. As you love, may I love in receiving and in giving. Spirit, open my heart. Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
The scripture for this morning is Mark 10, verses 46 to 52. They came to Jericho, As Jesus and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately, he regained his sight and followed him on the way. Here ends the reading. God bless it to us. Amen.
Thank you, John. Now, as I mentioned, yesterday we had our food drive, and it was a new experience for me that the library board had sponsored having MyFM come and do live broadcasts, 2 remotes, one from Lansdowne and one from Sealy's Bay, throughout the morning. So there was a guy named Cliff, who they say is usually the man from Gan, if you happen to listen to MyFM, but this time he was the man in Lansdowne to do his broadcast from there. And we had Terry Lynn up here in Sealy's Bay, so we got to speak on the radio a few times and talk about who we were and who we are as a food bank and express our thanks. So it was a nice little bit of difference, a little bit of variance, and it's always weird to hear your own voice on the radio. I don't know who I don't know if there's anybody that doesn't find it really odd to hear your own voice. It's not something that you often get a chance to hear. But we were talking back and forth, and after everything had closed up, Matt, who is one of our volunteers for the food bank, who lives in the Lansdowne area, he had been down at the Lansdowne store along with this fella Cliff from MyFM. And he told me a story, and he said, this fella Cliff, he's good at asking. He doesn't mind asking people. To the point where there was one fellow who pulled his car up across the street from the grocery store, and I guess Cliff must have shouted out to him and said, "We're doing a food drive." And then the fellow said, "Oh, that's interesting, and what do you need?" "Well, we're taking denominations from 50 on up, but we can't do thousands because there's just too much trouble with the big bills." So the guy looks at him, goes to his wallet, comes across the street, and pulls out a $50 bill. And Cliff goes, "No, we're just, he said, "No, take it." And then Matt said, "We gotta have this guy." This is amazing. And Terry Lynn, who was with me, was saying, "Oh yeah, he's legendary for that." And he has no problem asking people for things, because I guess they do a lot of live hits from various promotional things and a lot of charity work. And so she said, though, he even sometimes goes a little bit where, you know the thing when you don't want to make eye contact with someone who's asking for something? I think we've all done the walk past the kettle at the Salvation Army where it's just, that's a fascinating pattern on the ceiling tile here in the grocery store. I've never noticed that before. Or whatever it is, or at the liquor store, wherever it is that people are there asking for something. Sometimes, not always. We're pretty good at avoiding contact, but this fellow Cliff apparently has been known to do the whole, "Hi there, we're here to do something. We're wondering if we can get your I think I would hit somebody who does that. I think that might be pushing things a little bit too far. But then a lot of times I think I'm one of the people who errs on the other side and just hates to do any asking at all. It's something in me. It might be a fear of rejection. It might be the idea that I want to be liked. And maybe doing something like that puts another person in a position where they're not going to like me as much because I've asked something of them, and it may put them in an awkward position. And so I do that thing of sort of thinking about in my head, well, am I making it awkward for somebody else? I don't want to do that. I don't know. There may be any number of reasons why. For some of us, we find asking really hard. The hardest ask I ever had to do, by the way, was, and I think I've mentioned this before, working as a census taker. I still get just chills thinking about having to do that as a sort of a summer, fall job. One year, somebody called up and said, well, you know, they need people to go and hand out census forms to households. I guess I could do that. Now, you know, you'll need to follow up on people who haven't filled out their forms and ask why they haven't done it. Money is good. I like money. I need money, so I'll take the job. But it was a misery. I had a hard time asking people. But then I thought to myself, but why am I asking? And maybe that's kind of where I needed to start, which might help me to be a better asker. Why am I asking? Is there a reason for this? And with the census in particular, the reason is that those statistical things that the government gathers together are made use of by governments at all levels to attribute how much needs to be put into a budget for certain services or for the long form agenda, in particular the long form census. There's all this financial stuff that they need to record from people. If you've ever done the farm one, oh wow, the farm one is a small booklet over everything that they need to know of you. So it's a lot of information, but it's put to good use. And I have to keep that in my head, I think. And I think if I had realized that at the time, I would have been better at following up and knowing why it was that I was asking. Which I think is a key component of the story that we read this morning from Mark's Gospel. It comes at a critical time. We've been following through with Mark's Gospel as Jesus has been traveling through the countryside, and there's been a lot of conversation with his disciples, his pronouncements about who he is and what needs to happen, that he has to go to Jerusalem, that he has to face death, that he has to be put in front of the authorities and they're going to reject him, but that's not the end of the story. That God will still be with me and with you, even in the midst of that trial, even in that midst of that rejection, and that even death itself is not the last word, but God's last word will be resurrection and new life and hope once again. And the disciples kind of missed that, right? Over and over again. They get that wrong. We've talked about that at least 3 times over the last summer. And it's just one of those things, a theme in Mark's Gospel, that the disciples ask the wrong questions. They don't ask to fulfill what is needed in them. They ask about, well, who's going to be the greatest? Or can we sit at your left and right side? I mean, they're right in the wrong area in their asking. So just before Jesus finally arrives in Jerusalem, there is this one last healing story. And it's the first time in Mark's Gospel that the person who has been healed is named. And I think that's significant. That it is Bartimaeus. In the Gospel, even the son of Timaeus. But I mean, anybody who would read this would know that Bar is the prefix that's son of. So it's like saying son of Bartimaeus, the son of Bartimaeus. So it's a little bit of an addition, a redundancy really. But I think Mark does that to make really sure that we get a sense that this person is named. And unlike the disciples who seem to be struggling with who Jesus is, Bartimaeus gets it right. He gets almost everything right. He has trust in who Jesus is. He knows what Jesus can do. I asked you to consider risk in asking. Think about the risks that Bartimaeus makes. And William Placker, in his commentary on Mark, points out a few things that I had really missed in the story. I mean, I got that for one thing. I mean, it's another opportunity for the crowd to ridicule someone who's already on the edges. Bartimaeus is a beggar. He is without sight. He's intensely vulnerable as it is. I'm sure that in those times, in that circumstance, he'd have to be very careful about his belongings and where he was and to know kind of where things were. because there could be thievery, there could be all of those things. But Placker points out, he throws off his cloak. He says, consider that if you are without sight, and this might be as a beggar, the one article of extra clothing that you might have to protect you, to give you warmth or to give you cover, he throws that off into the crowd, and he's without sight. Will he find that one piece again? Will he have that covering? He commits completely to this moment with Jesus. And he cries out not once but twice. And he's brought before Jesus, and even Jesus shows a remarkable openness. I mean, Diane Trollope, in her commentary on this, suggests if it was you or I, and a man without sight came before you as the Messiah, you would think, okay, so this is going to be a healing. But Jesus' question is, what do you want from me? There's an openness in that encounter. There's not an assumption about who Bartimaeus is or what Bartimaeus might want. And Bartimaeus is so clear. I want to see. And his sight is restored. And as much as that is a physical miracle story, it is also clear that Mark intends it to be a bit deeper and richer even than that in risking all, Bartimaeus in that ask receives his sight, but he also joins Jesus. He follows him on the way. That in the asking and in the receiving, he receives even more than he might possibly have understood his asking to be. It is reassurance. It is purpose. It is to follow Jesus along the way, just before the arrival in Jerusalem. We have a reluctance to ask often of what Jesus can do, what God may be able to do. And that may have something to do with our own sense of not wanting to be disappointed, to struggle with what happens if the ask is not answered in the way we might think it should be. Diane Trollope again tells the story of a woman who asked desperately that her loved one wouldn't die. And I've been involved with pastoral calls in hospitals where people, that's the ask. Please, God, help this person along the way. Heal them. Bring hope to them. And when they die, there's that crushing moment where it feels like failure and it feels like loss. But Trollope writes that this woman, in her processing of the event and in her thinking, she thought about what God's promises are in life and also in death, and in life beyond death, and what healing might look like for someone who was terminally ill. Might it not be a release? Might it not be a freedom from the fear of dying and of pain? And I don't know. I think about stories like that, and in my own head I kind of wrestle with them and struggle with them. I think for each of us, we have to take time with stories like that. We have to look at our own experiences where we felt perhaps that the question hasn't been answered the way that we wanted it to. But was God still present? Was God still answering the question in some way that brings light and hope, even after death, into the hearts once again? And what do we lose by not even asking? By being reluctant to even bring those questions, to ask God for what might happen, how God might respond. There's a whole series now of these television programs. I think they first came on Australian television, and it would be like the Australians to do this, but the series is called You Can't Ask That. And it's a whole sequence. I think it's been going for 5 or 6 seasons on Australian television. And each one of the episodes is somebody who's been marginalized or is a minority in Australian culture or society. So it could be Aboriginal people, it could be visible minorities, it could be people with physical disabilities, it's people who have no sight. It's a whole range of people, and they respond to some of the questions that just people on the street ask, but would never ask the person, right? They'd ask everybody else except that person. You know, so for one of the sightless people, and this is, you know, I'm uncomfortable even asking this, but it's a question that people had, is don't you ever worry that you're going to look like a fool when you dress in the morning? You know, it's like, oh, that's a cringe-worthy question. But the woman who responded to that question, who was without sight, said, well, you know, yeah, I sometimes think that I'm not making the best fashion choices when I can't really see what I'm putting on. But then she paused and she said, but then again, I mean, I lost my sight 14 years ago, and even when I still had my sight, I was making some bad fashion choices. So maybe, you know, there's more to it. And it's that kind of show. The CBC has also had one for the last couple of seasons. I think it's on Gem, which is why I've never heard of it. So Gem is the streaming service, I think, that CBC does. But it's the same idea, and I think it's even called the same thing. You can't ask that. And on radio, there's a podcast called Inappropriate Questions. And it's the same sort of idea. Asking an Indigenous person, are you full Native, or are you some kind of blend? You know, or asking someone who has a wheelchair, you know, do you ever use that to butt in line in places? And it's, oh, wow. The things that we think, but we don't ask. And I mean, there's bad times to ask those questions, but when they're asked of people where they feel that they are in a comfortable and safe surrounding to be able to gently respond to some of those questions, as a result, there's understanding. And there's an eating away at the ignorance that we have when we don't ask those kinds of questions, or at least we don't feel that we can have that exchange in a way that's helpful. So as the one fellow said who has an artificial limb, he said, there's stuff, you know, I can talk about some of this stuff now, but don't ask me on the subway. You know, don't ask me on the subway if I take off my arm when I'm having sex. Don't ask me that. It's not an appropriate place and appropriate time for that. But, you know, when he's comfortable saying, you know, he said, you know, it'd be like leaving hockey equipment on. You're having it. Yeah, of course you take it off. So, anyway, the things that we can gain when we have some ability to ask, the understanding that we can gain. And I think the thing that I take away from the story of Bartimaeus the most is not so much the fact that he was blind and now he could see, but that he has the courage to ask that question with all the risks that may come from it. And that Jesus has this wonderful response to him, which allows him to follow Jesus along the way. It's so much more than a story about disability or about lack. It's about restoring dignity to an individual who needs that, who deserves that, and who then follows along the way. So if we can ask questions that bring the marginalized back into the community, and do it in a way that's grace-filled, and maybe with a little bit of humor, and with a whole lot of understanding, then I think we too are following in Jesus' way. And we can get up and be with Jesus, physically, spiritually, emotionally, whatever that might look like, and follow along the way. May it be so. Amen. This hymn is one that you may not be familiar with the tune. Your work, O God, needs many hands. It's number 537 in Voices United, but I wanted to hang on to the tune because I was reading a little bit about the story of Neil Dougal, who wrote this. And Neil Dougal was a Scotsman, and he served in the wars with the French. And so he was a service person in the war, and he survived that and came back home. And so the following year, Lord Howe, who was the great military naval genius that the English had at their time, and he was the first Lord Admiral of the fleet, they had a big celebration for him. And during the celebration, they were firing off cannon and musketry and various things, and there was an explosion. And Neil Dougal lost his sight and an arm as a result of that accident. And I can only imagine what somebody in that position might be asking of God when they survive a war and then come home, and in the midst of a sort of a celebration for their own admiral, there's this explosion, and all of a sudden you've lost an arm and you've lost your sight. And I'm not sure what Neil Dougal might have asked of God, but I do know what happened to Neil Dougal, and that is that Neil carried on in life. He had a family, he had many children, he was very successful as a music teacher. And he taught people piano. And he wrote many different tunes for psalms and for hymns. So somewhere along the way, he worked something out that allowed him to follow in faith. And so one of the tunes that he wrote was this Kilmarnock. And it may not be a familiar tune to you, but it is a beautiful tune. So we're going to sing Your Work, O God, Needs Many Hands. Our minute for mission is called Dignity is on the Menu. Many of us appreciate a well-dressed table and can afford to go out for dinner from time to time. Our daily experience doesn't involve standing in line for every single meal with a tray in hand. That's why special dinners like Café 507, that Ottawa-based mission service partner Centre 507, or 507, depending on your language, hosts are so important. Several times a year, the Adult Drop-In Center sets up a small room for a special fine dining meal with gourmet food, decorations, and candlelight. For $2, participants have their choice of meal accompanied by full service and great company. We realized that people in our community struggling with poverty had to wait in line a long time for a meal. When they were served, they weren't given any choice and felt pressured to leave so that the next person could be served. That's why we started Café 507, says Richard LeBlanc, Centre 507's executive director. We saw such a change in how people felt about themselves after experiencing this kind of a meal, that our ultimate goal is that this dining experience becomes the norm rather than the exception. While COVID-19 has been challenging, it has also helped the drop-in take an important step towards achieving their goal. One of the great things that happened is that when COVID hit, we had to start a system where everyone sat down and was served, said LeBlanc. Center 507 now serves 25 people at sit-down meals and provides 150 people with meals to go each day. The cafe has incorporated a training program where participants learn to be servers too. We are taking the next step towards achieving our goal. We aren't going back to lineups after the pandemic, vows LeBlanc. Your generosity through mission service helps restore dignity. Thank you for helping create a world where there isn't just enough food to go around, but it is shared with dignity too. And just a bonus here, there's included a statistical piece just to do a bit of follow-up. So in 2019-2020, multiple disasters struck the Philippines, including a series of earthquakes, 2 typhoons, and a volcanic eruption. Your gifts through mission service, along with ACT Alliance partners, were there to help. Here are the number of people impacted. So this is through giving, through mission service and our Alliance partners. 8,479 people received food. 8,666 benefited from hygiene and sanitation kits. 3,529 benefited from seeds and farming implements. 187 now have animals to help them farm. And 66 households can now access clean water. These are the direct results of giving in Canada being shared around the world. Let us receive this morning's offering, and we're going to do that by having our prayer and our music, and then there is a plate at the back, and if you are so moved, that's where we would ask you to place your donations. So. I guess we'll do this. Just play it off. Yeah. And let us pray. In every way, O God, you paint us all with the rainbow colors of giving. Take these gifts of relationship, of money, of time and space, of truth, of wellness, and of gracious leadership as the collection of diverse paintbrushes with which we wish to transform the world. Bless our artistry of generosity for your purpose, in Jesus' name. Amen. Let us pray. God, give us grace in our daily interactions as people of so many different backgrounds and understandings, abilities and awarenesses. We understand the richness of our society also leads to complication and complexity. It can lead to divisions and diversions which can minimalize contributions from people who we fail to understand or embrace or even recognize as being among us as your people, as your children. Sometimes we have been those people. We have been the marginalized. We have been the ones who struggle to make their way. But we rejoice that you are with all peoples in all circumstances. Help us to have seeking and inquiring hearts and minds. Grant us dignity in who we are and in what we do. Help us to build societies of understanding, of openness and inclusion. Help us to be courageous on following through on the promises we make. We give thanks for the diversity that we find in this place, in the wider world. We recognize a blessing from you. We hold in prayer this day people who are struggling with health concerns, with loneliness, who have felt the shadow of death upon them or upon their families. May your Spirit bring peace to their hearts as they ask some of the truly hardest questions we have to ask. We give thanks for moments of healing, moments of acceptance, moments where we feel encouraged along the way. For those who are gathered here, for those who are watching online, there are things in our hearts which we ask of you in prayer this day. Prayers that we might be heard, felt, acknowledged, both in our sorrows but also in our joys. God, hear this community now in prayer as we lift up our prayers to you. As we pray the prayer which Jesus taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And our closing hymn is number 642. I realize I seem to have gone Gaelic for this service, and I didn't set out to do that, but this is yet another one, I think, in that tradition of Gaelic music. Be Thou My Vision, number 642. And dedicate this one to the Visioning and Transitioning Committee, and we're in the middle of working on a vision and mission statement for the pastoral charge. Each of the churches has their own mission statement which they've developed, but we're now working on one for the whole pastoral charge. So God, hopefully, God we pray, be our vision as we do that work. Number 642. Now, this flight has almost reached its destination, but I should let you know that we will be serving you in the pews if you can stay afterwards. There will be coffee and biscuits served by our helpful attendants, and if you would like to stay, remain in your pews, and they will be coming up the aisle. Unlike the airlines, we can serve just as we're landing. But if you need to go, or you're more comfortable with going, whatever, that's also good. So, but just before we do that, just to let you know that that's what's happening. That's how we're trying to work out having a little bit of social time together, but still trying to maintain our protocol. So, whether you are staying or whether you have to go, until we meet again next week, may the love of God and the peace of Christ and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and always. There's that little orange sheet in the back, so if you don't have one of those, if you want to pick it up, it has all